Hello everybody and welcome to Classics with Combest. I'm your host with the most, the best in the best, Harley Combest. And today we're going to be getting into my top 5 reasons for why I think people should read Plato. Or at least some people. Mind you, this won't be a mutually exclusive list or an all-inclusive list, so there's going to be some overlapping and some people may have other reasons. So let's get us started with number 1 here. You're interested in philosophy. Now, some of you might already know what this word means, philosophy, and some of you might not. But to break it down here, just into 2 Greek terms, we have philos, sophos. Now this comes back to mean the love of wisdom. Now that can be a bit arbitrary. I mean, like, what exactly do you count as wisdom? So what exactly do people in the modern day study in philosophy? What are some of the telltale signs, if you will, that you're interested in philosophy? Well, you might ask yourself questions about reality, like, is there a God, or are we living in a simulation? Those sorts of things. And if you find yourself asking those sorts of questions, then you're going to be looking to something that's after the physical. So it's like, what I mean by that is not something you do for a football game, but the physicists look at the universe by the physical laws and attempt to come up with accurate models that stand to reason mathematically speaking. Now, basically, what we're doing is we're looking at things after physics whenever we asked questions like that. So, for those of you that don't know, the way that metaphysics came about as a term was by the work that came after Aristotle's physics. The works that came after Aristotle's physics, so literally after physics. And with those you look at underlying questions of reality, like, does God exist, as I mentioned earlier, or are we living in a simulation? Questions of reality / being. Right. So, if you ask yourself questions like that, you're interested in philosophy. Now, maybe you ask yourself questions like, how do I know what I know? How do I know that the sky is blue? How do I know that somebody cares about me? How do I know what wisdom is? How do I know what philosophy is? How do I know that I know things, right? And if you're asking yourself questions about how do you know that you know things, you're asking yourself questions involved with epistemology, questions of knowledge. I.e., how do I know what I know? How do I know? There we go. Yeah. So, okay, that's a little bit abstract. These 2 things are pretty abstract. Maybe you're not interested in questions like that. Maybe instead you're interested in something more concrete, like, what should I do with my life? How can I be a better person? What should I do to improve my well-being? Well, if you're asking yourself questions like that, questions of morality, you're dealing with ethics. Questions of right and wrong. Oops. There we go. And these are by no means the full inclusion of all of the subjects of philosophy, and do not encompass all of the things that you could be interested within it. Reasonably enough, you could be interested in language, the philosophy of language, how do languages work? Or you could be interested in beauty, the philosophy of aesthetics, different things that you could find in philosophy. But these are the three things that really stick out to me right here. And if you're interested in any of these, then you're interested in philosophy. So without further ado, let's get into reason number 2. 1 second, I'm looking for my eraser here. Looks like I'll just have to settle with this rag. So, if you're interested in philosophy, something that'll naturally follow is, well, in terms of Plato, how does Plato relate to modern times? How has Plato influenced modern times? So another reason why you should read Plato is you're interested in seeing how Plato has shaped modern thought. Oopsies. So one of the ways that Plato really shapes modern thought is well, through his student Aristotle, for one of the ways. But we'll get into that a bit later. For now, you want to see how somebody way back, like a few thousand years ago, came to influence modern thought. You see, there's a good quote by a famous philosopher that goes, "Everything is but a footnote to Plato." Now, that might be an over-exaggeration of some, but I would say, if anything, it does show the massive impact which Plato had on modern philosophy, if only due to the fact that he came first. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, before Plato, you had philosophers like Parmenides, Heraclitus, as well as Socrates, almost went blank there for a moment, Thales of Miletus, and so on and so forth. Socrates, by the way, was Plato's teacher. But the problem with these philosophers is that they didn't write down all of their ideas, for one thing. And if they did, only so in fragments. And if they wrote more than fragments, well, that's all that we have left. And also another thing, Plato wrote down in his complete works, Plato covers every ground of every philosophical branch that we have today, on such a scale that had never been seen before. And so, with a mind like that, it would be interesting to see how exactly that came to shape modern philosophers like Bertrand Russell, Kant, for instance, or Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, so on and so forth. And so, second reason for reading Plato is you're interested in how Plato has shaped these philosophers and how these philosophers have shaped the modern world by being influenced by Plato. So you're interested in seeing how Plato has shaped modern thought. Now let's get a little more specific about this, shall we? Say that you're interested in philosophy, you're already interested in how Plato has shaped modern thought. Well, how about this? You're interested in how Plato influenced Aristotle. So in a lot of polls, you'll see that what people consistently rated as the two greatest philosophers were Plato and Aristotle for the longest time. Now the reason for Plato is the vastness of his experience and what he comes to offer in his writings. The same thing with Aristotle. Aristotle is a bit more specific in the particulars, meaning that he's not strictly held to, I guess what you could say, as something that could be encapsulated in modern philosophy, though you could consider by definition all of the sciences to be included within philosophy. I'm operating off of a definition which excludes the sciences. And so Aristotle's impact on all of the sciences and as well as philosophy, that's not to say I'm not including his influence in philosophy, but if you want to see the impact that Plato had on Aristotle, you simply have to turn no further than, well, I guess his early works, but more specifically his later works, if you're looking at Aristotle's impact on science and how Plato came to impact Aristotle. And you see that in his later works with the introduction of things that look taxonomical whenever he's going through different categories of thought and breaking down sentences and stuff like that. You can see directly how Plato would have influenced Aristotle in his later life. That's so if you're interested in how Plato influenced Aristotle, then read Plato. And by the way, the Plato influencing Aristotle and other philosophers goes way beyond the pale of just philosophy and science. It also impacts theology, as we see with Plato's Greek thoughts influencing writers like St. Augustine in the Church, as well as Aristotle influencing St. Aquinas, also within the Catholic Church, how it came to shape religion. Because I did say modern thought after all, and I only really included philosophy and the sciences, but the scale of Plato and Aristotle is never to be underestimated. Which leads me to my second reason for why you should read Plato. I mean, not my second reason, it's my fourth reason. To see... Oh, no. Let's continue along the theme here, shall we? You're interested... I hope I don't misspell your in one of these. You're interested in the connection between abstract philosophy and this would be in ethics, which is influenced by metaphysics, on politics. Politics. So one of the things that Plato does later on in his life is he writes this book called The Laws. It comes after the Republic. If you've ever read the Republic, it's a lovely work, but I feel it doesn't capture the full matured process of thought that Plato runs into when trying to intermesh his ethics with government. So, in Laws, you run into the cardinal virtues of Plato, which are wisdom, temperance, courage, justice. And in him trying to bring about the fruition of these things in a society, he goes about through all of the things in the Laws. But that's rather abstract in terms of ethics, arising from his metaphysics, which you see in the Timaeus. How exactly does that affect politics directly? How exactly would that affect politics directly? How would anybody go about doing that? How would anybody, if they wanted to, let's say, maybe you're crazy and you want to bring about the Republic, from Plato's Republic, but focusing on Laws in particular, the later works of Plato, one of the things that he actually does is he goes to Sicily, Syracuse. There's a tyrant there, and Plato tries to influence the politics using the stuff that he wrote about in his Laws. And so, if you're interested in the connection between abstract philosophy and concrete politics, I didn't write that there, then turn no further to Plato. Well, eventually you'll turn further, but give Plato a read. What else do you have that's better to do than reading Plato, honestly? That's reason number 5. Nah. Reason number 5, you have nothing better to do. So just read Plato. Stop being a wimp. No. But reason number 5. So this connects to the first one, and I believe ties the whole thing together. You're interested in developing your character. So, one of the fields which Plato gets into is ethics. And I'd say that's actually a big crux of why Plato does the things that he does. He wants to get at the underlying ethics, of the underlying morality of what makes reality worth living. There's a quote that's often attributed, rightly so, to Socrates, that the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, what exactly does the examined life look like? What exactly does that life look like to you? How exactly are you going to live the examined life in today's world? Well, if you're interested in that, then read Plato. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Classics with Combest.